What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another podcast episode of Closing the Deal. Super excited to be back with you guys. I am one of your hosts, Sam Enright, and sitting across from me is my other host, Zach Dixon. Zach, how are you feeling today, brother?
Not too bad at all. What's going on with you?
Not a whole lot, man. Not a whole lot. Just just got back into the full swing of things here at work. It's been we're recording first full week into January, so we had back-to-back holiday weeks there. So just getting back in the swing of things, and yeah, just dropped our first podcast episode. Excited about that.
Absolutely. It's been a great week of content in general. Obviously, we recorded most of the stuff before the holidays and took a little bit of time off, obviously, for that. And you took a vacation as well. And so, like you said, get back in the swing of things. It feels good to get back behind the mic and get the headphones back on.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been about a month, so it's good to be back. But yeah, we're excited. We did basically our first full week of content as well. Rolled out everything, so we'll have more of that coming for you guys. But yeah, excited to be back recording
On all the platforms as well: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Instagram, Facebook, and a blog. So all the above. Can find us pretty much everywhere. Have just a lot of exciting things planned for the channel as a whole. So super excited.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Well, what do we have? What do we have for today? What do we got for everybody?
We are talking about the cost of buying a home. So a lot of those things that we see home buyers go through to buy a home are pretty much on the surface, but there is a lot of things that a lot of buyers don't think about when they go get the process started. So I want to touch on all of those things and make sure that people are well prepared financially when they enter into that purchase to buy a home.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is from the financing side of things, something that we see obviously a lot of first-time homebuyers and really just people in general focus on is the money associated with buying a home. Obviously, most people understand that there is going to be some sort of money involved, but really kind of breaking that down as to what to expect, especially at stages of it, because some fees for financing come in the beginning, and some come at the end. So it's always good to to go in with the proper expectations of how much money you're going to need and when you're going to need it.
And it could vary too throughout the process as well. Obviously, it can change a little bit just depending on maybe how your inspection results come back and how your renegotiation period comes back. So it really just it can vary throughout the process, and so just a lot of things to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, we want to start with what costs go into buying a home. Now, we're going to break each of these down for you guys, but just kind of wanted to give you, just jot through all of them real quick. So first one is down payment. Second is going to be your escrow costs. Then HOA costs, closing costs and commissions, and then maintenance, repairs / utilities. So getting started with the first one there, down payment. Down payment and closing costs sometimes can get a little mixed up. Especially when you talk with your lender about cash required at closing. Sometimes that's going to be a mix. It's going to be a mix of what you have to bring down payment wise, as well as what you have to bring closing cost wise. So your down payment is your minimum requirement for that loan type. Now, each loan type has different requirements. For your conventional loan, if you're a first-time home buyer, you can get in as low as 3% down. Other than that, your minimum down payment is typically going to be 5% for a primary residence. FHA is 3.5% down payment requirement. USDA is a 0% down loan, so there would be no down payment requirement with that one. And then VA, there is no down payment requirement on that as well. So, kind of just go through. If you buy a $100,000 house, you can get in with a down payment as low as $3,000 if you're a first-time home buyer for conventional. You're buying a FHA or you're buying a home with FHA, $100,000, 3.5%, $3,500 would be your down payment requirement for those.
So that brings me to a good question that we have pretty often with first-time home buyers in general, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. Is 20% down a requirement? And obviously you touched on the minimums, but what comes with those minimums if you don't make that 20% down payment when you go in to purchase a home?
Yeah. So with that, 20% down is not required. That is typically, I guess, I don't know if myth is a great word, but it is something that gets spread around online a lot when you look up, home buying properties. And it's even to the point where if you get on Zillow or Realtor.com and you look up the payments for or projected payments for certain properties, most of those are going to be with a 20% down payment included. And so the big key ticket item for 20% that most people get caught up on is the requirement to avoid mortgage insurance for a conventional loan. Conventional specifically, FHA has mortgage insurance for the life of the loan. USDA has mortgage insurance for the life of the loan. VA does not have any mortgage insurance at all for the veterans. So, the reason that 20% number is magical is because, again, if you put 20% down on conventional loan, you will avoid PMI in your payment. Now, again, as I touched on with the other down payment, minimum requirements, you are not required to put 20% down, and you can buy a home with less than that. So sometimes people think that they need that in order to buy a home, and that is not the case. So again, like FHA, 3.5%, conventional 3 to 5%, just depending on if you're a first time home buyer or not. So yeah, with that, MI not something to hugely be pressed on, in my opinion. Obviously, depends on how much house you're looking to afford, but on $100,000 house, 20% down is $20,000, whereas the MI payment, give or take roughly, probably 0.5%, is going to be somewhere around, I don't even know, 60, 70, $80 a month. So, it's not something as if though it's breaking the bank necessarily if you have MI. And then with that, for conventional specifically, once you reach a certain LTV, your MI will fall off. So even if you don't initially put down 20% with conventional, once you do reach that threshold, they will drop that MI payment off. It's usually around year 10 or 11 of your mortgage.
So following up on that, I actually did just have a client the other day looking at houses on Zillow, and he was looking at the monthly payment provided to him there. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, it was that 20% down. And so he was looking at payments that maybe he could afford, but he didn't realize that, that 20% down was required. And he wasn't in a position to be able to make that 20% down. So he's seeing information that unfortunately isn't necessarily correct in all situations. And it's just want buyers to be aware of that. So moving on from that, just in general, kind of touched on mortgage insurance. What exactly is that? Is that a positive for the buyer, or is that what exactly is mortgage insurance?
No, mortgage insurance is a policy that protects the lender if the borrower defaults on their mortgage. So it is basically an insurance for the bank themselves, not for the buyer. So that's the difference. And the reason, obviously, that it accompanies loans with lower down payments versus 20%, as you can imagine, is a borrower who has less skin in the game. Essentially, if you have $100,000 house, which borrower is more likely to default on their property? The borrower who only has $3,000 of their own money in the property, or the borrower who put $20,000 of their own money into the property? The obvious answer is that the person with less invested in it has a higher chance of defaulting, and so that is why that there is a mortgage insurance requirement for that. The government loans, obviously, I know we talked on VA, how they don't have mortgage insurance for the veterans. Government loans are different. There's going to be mortgage insurance, no matter what. So, although, I mean, and I don't want to speak too much on this because I haven't really brushed up on it a whole bunch, but I do know that they are looking at maybe some new legislation to cancel mortgage insurance for FHA loans once you reach that 78 percent threshold, same as how conventional works. So that could be big news for FHA borrowers in the future. So we'll stay tuned on that.
Awesome, great info. I appreciate that. Moving on, what I know you touched on it a little bit already as well, but what exactly are closing costs? What all goes into that when you get to the closing table?
Yeah. So closing costs is a little bit, I guess it just depends on how you look at it. I know every lender's a little bit different, and how we're going to touch on what escrow costs are as well. So most of the time when we're talking with clients, I encompass everything as closing costs, meaning your loan costs as well as other costs. Those other costs are your escrows, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit. But your actual closing costs, so your loan costs, are going to be whatever is charged by your lender to do the loan. Every lender is different. I know us at Kaysen, we have a set fee that we charge, an admin fee as well as a processing fee, I believe is that. So those are our two fees that we have, and so those are going to be your lender cost. And then you're going to go into the section that is labeled cost you cannot shop for. And what that's going to be is going to be you're going to have an appraisal fee, you're going to have a credit reporting fee. This is going to be for any sort of inspection, meaning if your appraisal came back, as subject to, and it needs repairs, we have to send the appraiser back out. There's an additional fee for that, as well as any upfront mortgage insurance premium for FHA is going to go in there, and any cost that your lender has. Like I know we have like an electronic closing fee that goes in there. And so those are things you have to get for the loan. We have to pull credit, we have to get an appraisal, all of those things. So that's going to be that section. And then you have costs that you can, borrowers can shop for. That's going to be your title company fees. So typically in Ohio, the title company is chosen by the seller. And so that's going to be all of the fees that they charge in order to do their title search, their title insurance, everything from there. So that's going to be what the actual closing costs are going to be for your loan. Those can range anywhere between, I guess 4 to 5,000. I would say usually is what is a baseline of what's disclosed. Usually most lender fees, usually anywhere between $18 to $2,000, and then you're going to have your title company fees that are going to be kind of around that same range. So the other side of it is going to be your other costs. The other costs that go into that are going to be escrow cost. So what is escrow cost? Well, there's what's called an escrow account that is attached to your loan. So you're going to have money that's set aside an account for you each month that you're going to make in your payment. So basically, you have your mortgage payment, you pay your principal and interest, and then you're going to pay your taxes and homeowners insurance as a part of that whole payment. When that happens, they're going to take that money that goes towards the homeowners insurance and property taxes and put it in what's called an escrow account for you. And then when those fees, I guess you could call them, become due, which in Ohio, taxes are due twice a year. Homeowners insurance is always due once a year. They take the money out of that escrow account and pay those bills on your behalf so that you guys don't have to worry about it. You just make your one mortgage payment a month. And then when the time comes to pay taxes and pay insurance, your mortgage company takes the money out of that escrow account, pays it on your behalf. Now, the reason there's cost for escrows at closing is because we have to collect a certain amount of money at closing to fund those escrow accounts to make sure that when those payments become due, there's enough money in the accounts to cover those costs. So escrow costs really depend on the time of the year that you close in relation to when the taxes are due. If your taxes are going to be due really quickly after you close, they're going to collect more upfront escrow costs because you're not going to have as much time to build that account by making monthly payments, if that makes sense. So if your payment's due in February and you close in January, you're only going to make 1 month's payment before your property taxes are going to be due. So if they only collected 3 months worth of property taxes in the escrow account, you'd only have 4 months worth and you would need 6 months worth because they're due twice a year. So you would come up short. And so how they combat that is they basically account for more cost at closing. They collect more upfront to make sure that those accounts are properly funded. For homeowners insurance, because you do pay the 12-month premium at closing as one of your costs, they always just collect 3 months for that because it's not going to be due until the next 12 months is up. So it's always going to be a set 3 months. The only one that's going to change is property taxes depending on the time period in which you close. So that's escrow costs. And, some lenders, when they give you closing costs, they're not going to include that when they talk with you. So they may say, hey, your total closing costs are going to be $6,000, and they may not be referring to the escrow costs as well. So just always ask for further clarification. We do our best on our end, when communicating with our clients to let them know, hey, this is, when we say closing costs, we're talking about your loan cost as well as your other costs, so your prepaids and your escrows. And I guess while we're here, because we don't have it on the list, prepaids, like we talked about, you pay a 12-month premium of your homeowner's insurance at closing. So that is what is considered a prepaid item. So let's say your homeowner's insurance premium is 1,200. That is a cost you at closing to pay for that entire first year's policy. Another prepaid item is prepaid interest. So depending on when you close your loan, depending on the time of the month, you're going to pay a prepaid interest um, fee from the day that you close until the first day of the next month. So the closer you are to the first of the next month, the lower the prepaid interest, the further away, the higher. So if you close, let's say on March 1st, and they're going to collect from March 1st until April 1st of prepaid interest, that's going to be a interest only payment that you make at closing. So just food for thought there as it pertains to those costs as well.
Great info for sure. And just kind of going backwards a little bit to touch on closing costs as a whole. There are costs that are going to be due throughout the process, throughout your closing process as well, in that 30 to 45-day range. And then some of those costs are also, as you mentioned, going to be collected at closing. So it's just important to make sure that you, as a home buyer, are budgeting for the items that need to be coming out before closing, because there are going to be a few items, like appraisal fees, inspection fees, things like that are going to happen pretty quickly right after the contract is accepted. And then there's going to be some other things that you may have, 30 to 45 days to kind of save up on and get ready to go when you make that payment at closing. I was actually just talking with another buyer recently, and he asked me, what is, the minimum that you would feel comfortable with moving forward, purchasing a home. And I told him, 6 to 7% of your purchase price. So that covers your minimum down payment of 3%, and then that'll cover your 3% extra of closing costs. So if you have, 6 to 7% of the potential purchase price, that could be, something to where you're maybe ready to get into the game as a homeowner. So
Yeah. No, I agree there. And just we can touch on a little bit further. Again, every company's different, every mortgage company is different, but we can kind of touch on the timeline in which our mortgage company operates, just like Zach said, so you guys do have an idea. So our only upfront fee that we charge at Kaysen would be an appraisal fee. So all of our borrowers are required to pay for their appraisal upfront in order to get that ordered, and so that is just standard across the board for us. So that it's $550. Every mortgage company probably collects a different amount as well. So that is one thing that we always let our clients know, in the pre-approval process, those sort of things. Hey, you're going to want to expect that you're going to have to pay $550 at the beginning of this contract, in order to order the appraisal. Now, Zach, there's some other fees that may come out on the real estate agent side of things, or on the property side of things, I should say, that have nothing to do with the lender. What can they expect maybe in the beginning for that may have to come out on top of that appraisal fee?
the biggest one's going to be your inspection fee. And really, that fee is variable just depending on the amount of inspections that you choose. If you choose that just standard residential property inspection, that's going to check all of the hardware in the property, kind of the bones of the structure. That's going to be around $500. And then there's a lot of different add-ons, like radon testing, termite testing, sewer and water pipe testing. So those are all things that you can choose to do as a buyer. And they add on the cost. But your normal, residential property inspection fee is around $500 or so, and that's going to be, pretty quickly into the process. Want to make sure you get those inspections done and get that report back pretty quickly, so that if there's any issues, that renegotiation period can happen. And also, if the property needs to go back on the market, the seller can do so, without much time lost as well. So that's going to happen pretty quickly into the process. And then from there, pretty much on the real estate side of things, everything else is going to be taken care of at closing. That does take me into kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and that is commissions. In 2024, it became a very hot topic, commissions. There was a National Association of Realtors settlement in August of 2024 that kind of changed the landscape of commissions as a whole. Generally speaking, the seller pays all real estate commissions in the purchase contract. So that means for their agent, for the selling agent, and that also means for the buying agent that represents the buyer. So That has been a pretty standard practice in the industry. You know, going back to when I got licensed, even further back than that. But in 2024, the National Association of Realtors had a settlement that now makes buyers have to go into buyer representation agreements with their buyer's agent. So, what does that mean? Basically, it just states that I am representing you as a home buyer. I, as a real estate agent, am representing you. And in that agreement, it actually states how much the real estate agent would be paid by the buyer if the seller is not willing to offer a commission to the buyer's agent. So, in all of the deals that I've done since August, all of the transactions that I've been involved with, all sellers have still been willing to pay a commission to the buyer's agent. So, that is a cost that the buyer does not have to incur to have somebody represent them, look out for their best interests, guide them through the process. Um, but it does come with a little bit of negotiation at this point after the settlement. So it is all negotiable. It does become a negotiating fact in the purchase contract when you do submit an offer. There's actually a full paragraph now that states how much the buyer's agent is going to be paid and by whom. And so there's just a little bit more transparency with the process at this point. So sellers know how much they're offering to buyers when they enter a contract with their listing agent, and then buyers know how much that they're going to be paying their buyer's agent if the seller is not willing to offer a commission. And like I mentioned, that's not very likely at this point. Most sellers are still sticking to the normal practice of paying a buyer's agent for bringing them a well-qualified buyer to close on their property. But in that buyer's representation agreement that you sign with your buyer's agent, it's going to be listed very, very clearly how much you will be on the hook for that fee as a buyer if the seller is not willing to pay that. So very clear, very transparent. And honestly, I think the change has been for the better since August.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, I'm not, dealing with the ins and outs on a day-to-day basis of being a real estate agent and negotiating those things, but I think that was probably one of the largest reasons. I mean, again, not to get too far into things that I am not overly been a part of, but ultimately, I think it was just almost like an unwritten rule that the seller would just take care of all of these commissions, and they weren't being told or being disclosed that that was the case. And so now you have to do almost your due diligence as a agent and let them know, hey, this is this fee's involved on your side of things if you guys are going to pay that, or what I'm saying, obviously disclose it to them, and at least negotiate it in the process. And we've actually had a couple of contracts where buyers have paid for their agent's representation. So we've also had it where, the seller's been willing to commit to half. So, I mean, if they agree to a 3%, the seller's agreed, we'll pay 1.5, and the buyer will pay the additional 1.5. So it's definitely just one of those things, where everybody knows what's going on. I mean, no, in no cases was anybody caught by surprise. So, like Zach said, I think it is for the better to just, be fully transparent and have these things disclosed and negotiated up front. So yeah.
And as a buyer's agent, when you go into one of those representation agreements with the buyer, me personally, I'm always going to go through every single paragraph of that thing and make sure that a buyer feels comfortable with what they're signing. Obviously, all of the documents that we deal with are legal documents, and so me as an agent, I feel an obligation to make sure that my buyer knows, what they're signing and what they're on the hook for, what they're obligated to do as a whole. So. And like this is a very famous saying in real estate: everything in real estate is negotiable, and that is holds true in the commissions as well. Literally every single part of the real estate purchase contract, for the most part, is negotiable. So if you don't have a favorable offer, to begin with, negotiate it a little bit. Have your real estate agent work for you. So everything's negotiable.
Absolutely. Absolutely, brother. Well, we're going to touch on something next. I'm going to let Zach mostly do that because, I mean, for us, this is not something that we come into contact very much. But one thing that we did mention was HOA costs and what those are. So, Zach, can you explain kind of what HOA costs and what people can expect that comes with those?
Yeah, definitely. So, in addition to obviously being a real estate agent, I work a lot in property management. I actually manage a couple of homeowners associations myself, so I get a very in-depth look on how these associations work. Basically, a homeowners association is a organization that sets declarations and bylaws for a specific community. And when you buy a home in that community, you are bounded by those declarations and bylaws. And so obviously that will come with some services. Some HOAs, come with a lot of amenities like a pool or a clubhouse or maybe a playground for children. Some HOAs will only provide very bare minimum services like landscaping and trash removal. Really just depends on the association as a whole and what they're willing to provide, whether it's if it's a single family home or maybe a condo or a freestanding condo. It all just depends on those things, on what the HOA is going to provide. But in addition to those services, obviously you're going to be paying usually a monthly fee or an annual fee to that HOA. And that is obviously going to cover the cost of all of the services that are provided to you within that HOA. So, with that being said, HOAs are going to budget every single year for their expected costs. And once they are able to determine that, they're able to determine a cost per unit. And that's obviously what you are charged on an annual or a monthly basis. These fees can change annually, just depending on expenditures, what all the association is planning on doing. Capital reserves and capital planning is a big factor in how HOA fees change. If an HOA is not adequately funded, they don't have enough funds in their reserve account to cover, capital projects, maybe repaving roads or things of that nature. That will lead the association to have to charge a little bit more to their residents there. So as an agent, when a client is interested in a property within an HOA, my first thought is always to look at the declarations and bylaws to make sure that there's nothing in there that will deter my client from buying the property. Maybe like leasing restrictions or changing things about their property. Maybe they want to change the windows, but some specific windows aren't approved in that community. That would be something that maybe we would want to think about before putting an offer in on this specific property. If you can't change something that you really want to change, that's obviously a problem. Um, with that, I'm also going to look at the financials as well. I'm going to make sure that the community is well funded. Make sure that they're not going to look into any sudden increases within the next 2 or 3 years. And then I'm going to look at the management company as well. I'm going to have a conversation with the property manager, talk to him, and make sure that he feels comfortable, or he or she feels comfortable with the association and the standing in which they have at the moment. And at that point, if all of those things check out, I feel pretty comfortable, advising a client to maybe take on those extra costs for some amenities or services that the association provides as a whole.
Nice, man. Yeah. I mean, I know I mentioned it. We don't typically where we do a lot of our business, we don't see HOAs too much as it pertains to the loan side of things. I will say we've had unique situations. We had a guy last year who was on title. He had a land contract on this property and was deeded on it. And once you've been deeded on a property for 12 months, you have the ability to refinance that into your own name. And so I believe it was a relationship, him and his dad, and he was on land title or land contract, and wanted to refinance. And so it was in this like association of some sort, and we got to the end and found out that he had to pay like some $6,000 initiation fee into this association on top of dues. And we were not aware of the initiation fee and those sort of things. So obviously that kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in things once we got to closing, and the title company's like, hey, we have to pay for this initiation fee or those sort of things. So definitely, obviously, something you want to talk with your agent about as it pertains to HOA. I mean, those costs would fall under the other cost section on your when it comes to your loan. Again, it doesn't really have anything to do with the loan specifically, but it does have to do with the property. And if you owe, if you have to pay for a year's worth of, your HOA up front or anything like that, those would be definitely things you would want to know going in. That way you can account for those costs that would not be normally disclosed on your LE or closing disclosure. So just something to be mindful of.
And it can definitely change a monthly payment, a mortgage payment. Like if you're not thinking about your HOA fee, it can take your monthly payment to be within budget or to not being in budget. So you definitely need to check out all of those costs before you make an offer on a property in an HOA. And like you mentioned, all of those, reserve contributions and initiation fees and things like that are all in the declarations and bylaws, or at least should be. 99% of the time are going to be in there, legally recorded with that county's recorder's office. And so reading through those before you make that offer is crucial as an agent. To make sure that you're seeing everything before you enter into a contract, a legal document on something that you don't know everything about.
For sure. Good stuff there. So our last thing that we wanted to talk about was, maintenance, repairs / utilities, and those sort of things, and what those costs look like. You know, I mean, I guess I can kind of talk from our side of things, and how, you know, repairs specifically, because for the most part, I know we talked about our cost, an appraisal fee up front. Outside of that, I mean, the only thing that you may incur cost wise throughout the transaction that would be paid outside of closing would be, one of those things could be, something like a water test. If you're on a well and you're on a government program, you have to test the water to make sure it's potable. So that fee would come up. And then repairs. So sometimes, just depending on, I guess, the situation with the seller, we've had it where the property gets appraised, comes back from appraisal and has repairs that need to be done, but it was agreed in the contract that you would buy the property as is. So where do you go from here? Because from a loan side of things, you may have agreed to buy the property as is from the seller, which means not to request your own repairs when you go through with an inspection, those sort of things. But this is a repair that is required to be done in order for the appraisal to be as is, and the loan company is not going to close the loan until the appraisal comes as is. So where do you go from here? And we've had clients that have literally had to go out and do work on a house that they didn't even own because they agreed to buy it as is in the beginning, and then there were repairs that came back on the appraisal that they had to take care of themselves. So those sort of things are one-offs. It's not a very common situation, but I know sometimes it can be agreed upon for sellers and buyers to split costs of things that come back on the appraisal to get them done quicker. Because usually, not for the most part, most people are not just expecting, the appraisal to come back subject to. For the most part, most people are hopeful that it'll come back as is. So sometimes those costs can jump out at you a little bit.
Definitely. And just following up on repairs, and we already talked about a little bit inspections. Once you have those inspections done, you're going to get an inspection report in your hand. And basically from there, you're going to be able to negotiate any repairs that you'd like done off of that inspection report. Obviously, the one caveat that, Sam mentioned there is if you're in a contract that is as is, if you agreed from the beginning that you're going to buy the property in as is condition, at that point you are just having an inspection report done for your own knowledge, which is beneficial in itself as well. Obviously, if you're buying a property, having information on all of the things that may come up over the next 12, 24 months or so, is good information to have. So you're able to budget at that point, that you may need a new water heater in 2 years, or in 5 years, you may need a new roof. And so inspections are key at that point. It's going to show you obviously small things that may have been missed, preventative maintenance things, but it's also going to show you, your large ticket items that you can start to plan for, start to budget for. And if it's super bad, obviously you can at that point maybe get out of the contract as well, even if you're in it as is. So inspections are key. And then another thing that is a part of the contract that can be paid by the seller or buyer, is obviously a negotiable aspect of the contract as well, is a home warranty. And so basically a home warranty is going to cover most of your large ticket items inside of the home. Pretty much the only thing it does not cover is going to be your roof. and that is usually between $600 and $700 for a year. Basically, it's just insurance on all of the large ticket items of your home. You know, your furnace, your hot water tank, your piping, all of those things. And so that is something that, as a buyer, you can ask for the seller to pay for. Obviously, is a negotiable fact within the contract. So, but it does prevent you from, you know, having to make those repairs out of pocket, you know, in that 12-month time span. If you have a hot water tank go out, you can call your home warranty company and they'll be able to come out and fix that or repair it or replace it for free. So it's kind of like an insurance policy against your home for a year. And even if the seller pays for it for a year, you are able to continue that after that. Obviously, it would just be on your dime as well. The last thing I want to talk about really is utilities. Basically, to find out a utility cost, you are able, as just a, you know, a resident of a city or a county, you can call your local electric provider or gas provider, water provider, and find out past usage. So if I'm, you know, buying a home, I'm going to call AEP and I'm going to ask for the last 24 months worth of bills, and I'm going to find out, you know, what was the average cost of the electric bill through the summer months, through the winter months, and then be able to budget from there and determine, you know, if this mortgage payment plus all of the utilities are something that I can afford on a monthly basis. And so that's a pretty easy process. You know, sometimes sellers even provide it within their listing as well. So not hard information to find, but it is super valuable information as well. So
No, yeah, that's big time because that's a lot of things that or not, maybe not a lot of things, but you know, sometimes things that don't get taken into account is the utility side of things, especially when we talk with clients on a mortgage side. You know, when you talk about payment, you know, that's not including your utilities, your spectrum, your electric, your gas, your water, you know, all of those things that go into, you know, making a house a home, the things you need. So
and
yeah,
sometimes I
great.
think people, you know, when people are renting, they have all those things included. So it's not, they're not paying those things at all. So that's out of sight, out of mind. They pay their rent, and you know, maybe those utilities are included in their rent. And so when they go to buy a home, you know, it's just not something you think about. And so, just good information to have as a whole.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because I can think right now. I mean, um, two things that are included in my rent is water and trash. That you know, I couldn't even begin to tell you what the bills would be. You know, if I was to have to pay those on my own. So, but yeah, I mean, guys, I mean, the last thing I wanted to touch on was really just kind of just a overall timeline of money. I mean, as we talked about it, you know, really just kind of obviously you would want to think that maybe the average of a home inspection is going to run you about 500. Again, appraisal, depending on the company, is going to be a little bit different company to company. But you know, for us, for most appraisals, 550. VA would be a little bit more expensive because they're typically more expensive of an appraisal to get done. So I mean, right there off the bat, you know, once you go into contract, you're going to be looking at, you know, $1,000 probably within, I would say, what, the first week, realistically, of being in contract is a reasonable timeline for that. And then really the rest of the cost, again, there's going to be, you know, maybe certain situations where you may incur some costs throughout, but most of the time it's going to be all paid there at the end, at the closing table. You know, you're going to bring all of your costs under one, you know, one umbrella, one cashier's check, and cover it all, or one wire to the title company to cover it all. So, yeah. I mean, if you guys are looking into buying, you're going to want to be prepared for those costs in the forefront, you know, that $1,000 up front. And then, you know, like Zach said, I think a good rule of thumb is obviously 6-7% of your purchase price is going to be, you're going to put yourself in pretty good position if you have that setback and, you know, ready for when you go to buy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, that concludes another episode of our podcast here, Closing the Deal. So hopefully you guys found the information, you know, valuable, and hopefully it helps some of you guys kind of get a better, more realistic idea of what it costs to buy a home. You know, we talk about this sometimes with clients because, you know, sometimes the conversations go a little bit differently, and people think that they can, you know, buy homes for very, very little money. And we always say, well, how much does it cost to rent? You know, most Most places, when you go to rent, you got to put a security deposit, call that anywhere between 600 to 1,000, and you owe first month's rent. So if you're, average rent in, I would say probably Franklin County is probably somewhere around 1,400 at this point. So right there, you're $2,500 out the door, and that's your cost to rent. So I would definitely, change the expectations you have if you think that you're going to buy a home for less than you're going to get in your first month's rent. So, that's just unfortunately the costs of doing business. So yeah, if you guys can prepare yourselves for that and start to save and start to create a game plan around those costs, you're going to put yourself in a much better position come the time, or come time for you to buy a home. So.
And on the flip side too, we see a lot of clients that again are fall under the myth of needing 20% down, that they are, overqualified. They have plenty of funds ready to buy, but they are under the assumption that they don't have enough. And so there's clients on both sides of the spectrum. If you have enough, I always recommend getting into the game as soon as possible, buying as soon as you possibly can to, start accumulating real estate. But obviously you want to make sure that you do have that minimum amount as well. So finding that happy medium and getting into the game is crucial and key.
Yep, absolutely. Hopefully we have debunked that myth or mystery or misinformation or whatever you want to call it that's out there, because it is out there. I was scrolling Instagram the other day and saw something about 20%. So again, don't fall into the trap, guy. I mean, we've already talked about it on previous podcasts. Don't fall into the Zillow realtor.com trap as is. But if you are on there, definitely don't start looking at payments, fantasizing about having this house for probably, $500, $600 less than what it's actually going to be when you take into account your down payment versus 20%. So, just something to think about, guys. And again, hopefully this episode has been valuable. And if there's anything you guys, that was covered that you have questions about, don't hesitate to, put that in the comments. We will love to hear your feedback, and, more than happy to answer whatever questions may come up, from this information.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned, guys, we're on all podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of our social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. So feel free to give us a follow, give us a subscribe, and like Sam said, give us a comment and let us know what you had questions on or what you want to hear more of. We're on you guys and want to create content geared around getting buyers to the end table, to their property. So appreciate you guys tuning in again, and hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend.
Absolutely. Have a great one, guys. We'll talk to you on the next one.